Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your email questions and comments, dj@ArtistFirst.com. Here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And tonight, the technology gods are just kicking our little butts. But we made it. And hopefully it doesn't sound too terrible.
Well, we'll just take a breath and begin.
We'll be present.
Mm-hmm.
And so tonight, despite the technology ass kicking, we are going to be stronger with every passing moment.
Right. We have resolved that no equipment will defeat us.
Will defeat us. Excuse me. And tonight's topic is actually an interesting one. Sort of a departure. You know, the soul of the everyman, we have so many interesting things that we talk about. At least we think they're interesting. And sometimes those topics can get not in each other's way, but they can have a lot of commonality. So sort of a departure from our normal fare. We want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're kind of doing on a more day-to-day basis. And one of those things that Margaret's doing specifically is working a lot with children. Lately, she's become involved with a preschool for young children. You know, they're really in the 3 to 5 year age, and you know, it's a wonderful opportunity to re-experience that age, to teach. And, you know, the school that she's involved in is very kind of focused on how those children develop. You know, it's not just the sort of thing where you're developing A, B, C's and 1, 2, 3s and counting and all those skills. All those things happen, of course. But the one of the main focuses is to give these kids what I would call emotional intelligence, sort of an awareness of who they are emotionally, and of their presence, of their being, not in so many words, but it's an opportunity to, at a very early age, expand that capacity which everybody has, which is often, unfortunately, crushed or at least ignored under some more traditional forms of very well-meaning education. And I think you would be the one who would best guide us into this, because you're the one kind of on the front lines there.
Well, when you're involved with young lives, especially since we were also involved in the pediatric wards, cancer wards, it opens your eyes to the amazing clarity that children actually have. And they will communicate it to you if you open up enough to begin that dialogue with them. You have to kind of help them through the vocabulary of what they're feeling. And sometimes, especially when they're young, they don't have the words to describe exactly what they're feeling. So you have to be very alert to the situation, because there's no way you can explain to anybody what your emotion happens to feel like, if you're happy or sad, without the other person having experienced happiness or sadness. the typical description would be, how do you describe the color blue to a blind person?
Mm.
So it's being very alert to what experiences are unfolding for your child and taking the moment to be there and begin to introduce either a new pattern or showing them how to react on an internal level. In other words, if some news comes in and it's not the best news, as a parent, you realize that situations like that always happen.
Mm.
And not to break down in a heap and cry or start screaming because it's not going the way you want it. If you've ever watched anyone in a situation like that, especially a young child, they're looking to their parents for guidance on how to respond to whatever is going on around them. And their emotions rise up, and it's varied because they're looking at it, and they don't just, first of all, they're frightened for themselves, but when they see the foundation of their family looking like they're falling to pieces, there's nothing more frightening to a child. But they also know that somebody's got to be strong in that situation. Mm. So they will literally put aside whatever they're feeling and look to mommy or daddy and try to figure a way to help them first. And that was an amazing observation. I saw it repeatedly throughout all our time in the cancer wards, pediatric cancer wards. And it made you realize the depth of the soul of each child, each individual human is amazing. As long as they're clear enough not to be overwhelmed or not knowing how to handle their emotions in that moment.
Well, and those skills, what you just mentioned about knowing how to handle your emotions, are often not taught. And people have to come to them sort of, sometimes you'll have a good example. You'll have a person or persons in your life, could be your parents, could be other people who are close to you, who can model, the mature control of their emotions, or the expression of emotion without having sort of the negative connotations. Oh, don't feel this way, don't feel that way.
Right.
And that can happen, and oftentimes, and it's very good if that does happen. But many times, you mentioned the blind. It's the blind leading the blind. There are folks who they themselves have never really had much training on how to control their emotions. Sometimes all they do is bottle them up or shove them aside, and we all know that can create shards of yourself. It can create traumas, neuroses, and all these other things. And if they have to express an emotion, it's often an out of control emotion. They're out of control sad. They're out of control mad. Their happiness can be taken to excess and extremes. So if you want to prosecute or pursue the training of human beings to be beings, you have to reflect into all the components of a human being, because there is, as we have talked about many times, the presence, the consciousness of which all things happen within. But there is an emotional body, a component of us which is not to be suppressed, not to be indulged, but to be acknowledged as being inherent and essential an emotionless human being is someone no one wants to be around. We have terms for it. A psychopath, for argument's sake, someone who cannot really feel any genuine emotion or empathy. So you don't want people developing into psychopaths, but you do want to give them tools. And what you and the folks who are working together with you are doing are finding. You mentioned techniques for to allow the children to identify their emotions. They may not have the words, and these are some things we can go into a little bit.
Right. Well, I mean, it's something that I have seen a need for as a mom, because you're always searching to try to help your children. And this is without any kind of pressing illness on your children. You're just trying to help them navigate their own emotions so they were not overwhelmed by it all. And this is something you and I have spoken about, because I know when you did the emotional
emotional intelligence training.
Yes, the emotional intelligence training. It is something that the creator of that had also seen, as well as the Dalai Lama had also seen.
Yeah,
that
Paul Ekman, just to mention. Yes, go ahead.
This is a basic need for all human beings. Mm-hmm. And with the quote that we have, it is much easier to begin to teach this at a young age. But what that means is the adults that are teaching it must be able to handle it in order to teach it. There's no such thing as teaching it when you don't know it.
That's so true.
You cannot give what you do not have. As simple as that. And to have the ability to navigate that emotional pathway is a skill that we have not really, it's been overlooked, let's put it that way, especially in the Western society. I think it was always left to the parents to try to teach the kids how to handle their emotions, but we know that there are many families that have not worked that out yet.
Right. You just in passing, you alluded to the quote, but maybe we should give the quote if you want, because it's an interesting one from Frederick Douglass, the philosopher, really. But go ahead.
It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken ones, broken adults.
Exactly, and what Douglass is saying here is in essence a sort of an analog of another saying that you've probably have heard also, which is that as the twig is bent, so the tree grows. The human being, in the beginning, we are absorbent. There's nothing more absorbent of knowledge than an infant. They're literally, people compare them to sponges, but it's sponges for experience, sponges for all forms of input, stimulus, and then they start to take that in. It gets processed through their own individual awareness, through their own mind and their own body, and they learn. They learn at an incredible rate in the beginning. An incredible rate. You go from, not having any language whatsoever to your first words in just a few months, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. You go from not being able to really move much on your own to walking or crawling or even running in a year. Right. And you see these sorts of things. Well, these are comparable. These are genius-level events, because at that moment when a mind is incarnate, when a spirit is incarnate in the body, it has to refill its experiential training for this space again. Sometimes things come back. we often talk about old souls, and there are skills or sometimes things that they must address or learn here again or re-experience perhaps. However, getting there requires climbing this hill of really knowledge of your body, knowledge of your wants and needs, the knowledge of language, of interaction, of communication, of observation. And in those beginning stages, a little bit further on in their lives, when they have some of the basic skills, they still need to handle, everyone knows how emotional children are. We all are. But at that age, it becomes an overwhelming sort of thing. You see it, when you're teaching 2 and 3-year-olds, because when they're mad, they're really, really mad, and when they're happy, they're really, really happy, and when their emotions hit them, they have no reservation. They cry uncontrollably, or they laugh out loud, or it's experiencing emotion at the cutting edge of emotion.
Well, it unfolds right in front of them, and that's what they do. There's no barrier. They're not stopping themselves at all. But
right.
The other thing is if they feel uncomfortable in an environment, they almost close down because they realize that they can't necessarily control what they're feeling. So they try to sit on it, which is amazing to watch because it's just this little, and then they explode.
Yes.
But that's exact. They have to feel comfortable in an environment to be able to go into the depth of the emotion that they're feeling, experience it, and then bring themselves back to a calmer state or a centered state. It's just naturally coming back to, okay, it's all right. I felt that way. And to be able to understand that it's perfectly all right to feel the emotion and then let it go. That's an option. Too many have begun to feel that it's you feel the emotion, then you're supposed to hang on to it. And I think it gets reinforced when someone starts berating you about feeling the emotion. It's almost like the feeling of guilt rises up, and then it tries to put these sticky fingers around the emotion that you're feeling and try to contain it, which is, as I said, it's a momentary thing, but suddenly you've interposed an experience of failure in the mix of feeling that emotion. Very confusing.
You mentioned just something a moment ago, and I think it's a good place to also discuss. You said it's all right to, I felt the emotion, and one of the tools you were telling me about was when children initially start to express themselves, they say, I am angry, or they've been told that you are angry, or you are sad. And this is something that Tolle often cautions against. When you say I am, you're talking about your being, and you're identifying, and you're bringing in the ego. And when the ego sees something like an I am moment, it jumps right in there. And as you said, if someone tells you don't be that, you're not angry, don't be angry. The ego is like, oh, no, I am angry. Don't tell me what I am and what I am not. So it reinforces it. Even in repression, that anger isn't allowed to come up, to be, and to go. It becomes a static thing or a hardened thing. So what you guys are doing, what you're doing, is in essence saying to them, you feel angry right now. That's okay. Feel it. But it's just a feeling. It's not who you are. You are, in a simple way, you're saying you're greater than that. You're bigger than that. You are whoever you are. You're Johnny. But Johnny feels whatever Johnny feels. And then I think you also give them techniques to say or to express in an external way what they're feeling.
Well, it's, again, at least for myself, I am trying not to rely on the words, because throwing words at it interferes with the experiential process. They need to understand that the emotion rises, and to feel the emotion, and this is what it means to feel sad. Throwing words at it doesn't mean that the child will feel better. I've seen it many times where a parent will come over and try to almost reason the child out of sadness. And you sit there and you go, let them process through. Emotions are meant to be walked through, not clung to, not thrown aside. You just walk through it. And once you walk through it, you realize that, first of all, it's a very powerful experience, but you're not overwhelmed by it. The overwhelm comes when you try to put sticky fingers on it and either hang on to it or manipulate it. That's when all that stickiness starts. So to allow for space, because that's, again, I go back to a child or any human being will only allow themselves to feel what they're feeling if they feel safe. So this is the origin of safe space. It doesn't mean that you go, if you're feeling fear, okay, you're in a safe space, and then you continue clinging to your fear. It means that you experience fear as it is and let go. And that's the true definition of a safe space. You are allowed to feel what you're feeling, and you are acknowledged in what you are feeling, but you're also allowed to see that you can take steps through that and past it.
You know, it's interesting you say safe space, and I think people say, well, then I get to live there. And what you're really saying is it's a safe space to walk through.
Right.
It's a safe space that contains all that, because I think, again, totally says emotion is power. You know, emotion is energy that is of the body, that comes up, that rises up, and can be very powerfully used if it's not allowed to feed an ego identity or to overwhelm and to take over. And as he says, you can end up saying and doing things that you would never say or do under this ego identity of emotion. If you say, I am angry, then you can do anything angry can do. But what you're saying is perfect, because at this early age, when they're just twigs, as we all started out as twigs, you're showing this, how to grow into this, having a safe space that you are allowed to experience the emotion as a feeling, which you, who are walking into the emotion, and some of this is also what Ekman teaches, that emotions rise up. They have a certain defined period. Some are longer than others, but there's a defined period. There's a period at which you cannot do anything about the rising of the emotion. Don't even try. Then there's a period where you have to realize that you are in an emotional reaction. This is Ekman, not Tolle. And then you have to realize that there's going to be a period of time where it kind of is, they call it refractory, or it just doesn't go away for a little, and then it will fade. Knowing that having that emotional intelligence lets you say, okay, wow, what is this? I'm suddenly furious. Okay, I'm furious. Just let me be furious, but don't act upon it. Don't be it. Yes. So as you teach these children, I think you guys give them something that they can point to. How do you feel? I feel this, whatever this is, but it gives them an action that they can do just to let everyone know, I feel this. And then, I have to say, okay, now what happens? I let it come up. I feel it. I let everybody know that I feel this way right now. You teach them that they walk through that. And then there's techniques I even think you guys have given them where they can use a breathing technique or some other technique to understand that, you can let it come up and let it, give it space, and then bring yourself back down to what would be sort of a less emotional or non-triggered or emotional state. And all under your control, all under your time frame, if you will.
Right. It's just having the experience is key. Because if they're angry, let's say, or disappointed, they wanted something and they couldn't get it, to allow themselves to feel that disappointment. And sometimes when you're disappointed, you just really don't need an audience.
Right.
So you let them have their space, and then you check and see where they happen to be. Let them go through it. Or sometimes some other kids might just need, I'm really sad. So they'll curl up in a, leaning against the pillow or something. And sometimes all they need is just a hand on their shoulder. No words, just like, okay, I'm here. It'll be all right. You don't say a word. It's just your hand on their shoulder tells them it'll be fine. And they go through it, and then they breathe, and then, all right, I'm out of it.
Yeah. And that, you see, the first few times you do that journey, maybe it's an unfamiliar one. But once you have taught someone that this is just a little journey that you're going to go through, your body is bringing up an emotional energy. It comes up, from who knows where it comes. It just comes out of nowhere. Oh, all of a sudden I'm this. I'm very angry. I'm very sad. This is what you can use these words and say, I feel angry. I feel sad. Feel it. But then if you're guided through this journey of, okay, someone just a hand on the shoulder, just being there with you, not saying, oh, why are you this, and could it be that, and well, shall we do this, and shall we do that, and why don't you do that, blah, 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 all those words,
Do you think it was this? Was it this? The interesting part is that the adult has a tendency to want to put it in a story form.
Yeah.
And you gotta watch that, because it's not really your story. It's the child's story, if you would. So let them experience it, and then let them explain to you what they experience, not what you think they experience.
Very important distinction. And then once they've gotten to the, through that period of intense emotion, then into sort of the recovery period, and then through it to the, out the other side, and then on to something else, because the heart of youth is extremely plastic, and they're crying and hugely upset one moment, and then they're just happy as clam and off, because you get them through it. And then you, I believe you see some dramatic, because again they're sponges. They hold it, they grab onto, say, oh, I know how to do this now.
Yeah.
And then they'll teach other people. What you do is this, and then you do this, and then you hold your hands together and you breathe, and it's so wonderful. And you listen to them doing this, because they're just as happy to learn and explain and redo it and learn their own. They internalize it and they learn their own techniques. You give them some one little thing, and they'll
make it their own.
They'll make it their own.
Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful, this is the true learning, as far as I'm concerned, to be able to handle not just your emotional state, but also your mental state. And to it's really key in being honest with yourself, because kids are honest with themselves to start with. They learn how to be, how do I say this? They learn how to fool themselves.
Yeah. And if you learn that, you'll bend in that way. Tell you what, I can feel that the twig of the middle of the hour is bending us toward a commercial break. So let's do that, and we'll come back out on the other side. We'll talk more about repairing some broken adults.
Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
Moonstones and Murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some Moonstones and Murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is Hannah Ruth from the band Wild Hum. Check out our new Americana Soul CD, Wild Hum, at our website, wildhummusic.com. And you are listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Let's get back to your hosts. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And one thing I wanted, just a little inside baseball. We do have to get off a little bit before the end, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, because we started. There was such a contretemps getting this program on the air at the beginning of the show that I missed all that. It was anyway. So we are talking tonight, a little bit about children and all of us who were children and some of us who are still children. We all were children, and we all had to learn, about
how to pretend to be an adult. Yes.
How to pretend. You could not put it better than that. We all had to learn how to pretend to be an adult.
Right.
And some of us learned better than others. And actually, though, it's an incredible skill to begin to engender into the young. And a lot of, as Margaret mentioned in the last half hour, I did a lot of training in something called emotional intelligence, and there's a number of folks who have done research in the area. Paul Ekman's one of them, and he's I think one of the better ones because he did his PhD thesis on it, and he really found some amazingly universal things about emotion, and I won't go into that, but a lot of that has been reflected in what you see in Tibetan writings. In the Dalai Lama also became involved. Ekman and the Dalai Lama had a number of meetings, and the whole idea of promulgating emotional intelligence, because it is so essential, especially into the young, has been gathering steam, and it shows amazing results in a very short period of time. Margaret's been working with some young children, and one of the things that they're helping teach them is this sort of awareness of your emotional self and techniques, ways to understand what an emotional reaction is and how to walk through it. And you'll find that as soon as they grasp the concept, they sort of internalize it, they make it their own. They find new ways to kind of internalize it and use it, and then they're so happy to share it with others. They'll say, "Oh, you're feeling this? Well, when I feel this way, this is what I do, and maybe you should try." There's this wonderful sort of synergy going on amongst them, and they also acquire a sort of emotional awareness about others. They say, "Oh, so and so's feeling, sad. I should let them have some space and not talk to them too much, and maybe I could just put my hand on their shoulder." And this is an amazing sort of thing to also see them act out, because what they're now doing is not doing the, "Oh, why do you feel this way? And tell me all about it, and let's have a story," and which is so common, right? It's so common. People want to tell you what you're feeling and why you shouldn't feel that way.
It's more of a raw response. I mean, if they really want something, they both want something, and that's when the conflict starts. And they'll start shoving or pushing or grabbing and pulling. I mean, that's the normal, let's face it.
Right. The children, but as they grow, they can also work into these kind of wordy and sort of mental responses to emotion.
They redirect all that energy into verbal application, but verbal will only work if both parties are willing to listen to the other one. And nobody is going to listen unless they get through their emotion, truthfully.
Yeah.
Because they're so involved with trying to figure out what this emotion is, and where they're at as they're going through it is they're focused on themselves. They're not focused on anybody else. So they've got to start there. You can only start where you are. And if you're feeling that emotion, like I want that, and you just want to grab it, it's like, wait a minute, I understand. You could stop and you both look at each other like, yes, we understand. And one person can say, well, okay, I need a little space. If it's too close, or if someone has a hand on the thing that you happen to be holding, it's like, now wait a minute. I'm not done yet. It just it's taking that moment and just stating plainly what's going on. There's no accusation involved. It's just, let's be aware, I'm not done yet. Or, I need space. No, it's not like, you're too close and shove. No.
Oh, it can begin there. But I mean, you mentioned something earlier, which is, I think, very, very powerful. Is that the ego and the story is how a lot of people get taught about how to handle their emotions.
Right.
And I wouldn't say it's done with with very well-meaning intentions. And many times people have been trained this way where you have to make them, talk about it and reason and use your words. You've heard all these phrases, but these fly in the face of the human being. The human being in an emotional state doesn't want to use his or her words.
No.
And a story just feeds an ego thing. It makes the ego center. You are this. You are that. I am angry. I am sad. And then why are you sad? The ego loves whys, because then it gets to be right. Well, because this one did that, and they were did, and they shouldn't have done it. I mean, this is, and people whose whole emotional lives are stories about what everyone else is doing to make them sad or make them angry, and why they're right. And it's all fueled with emotion. Ego loves emotion because it's fuel to the fire. It makes it feel powerful.
No, it's true. It's true, because if you're identifying with the emotion of I am angry, then suddenly you feel powerful.
Yes.
I am sad is not so powerful. In fact, you almost want to curl up somewhere and like, nobody talk to me.
Although people use the I am a victim, I am wounded, I am sad as a kind of a reverse cudgel and a bludgeon too. It can all be very, very toxic.
That's a inverse. That's a twisting. It's like the emotion as it is. This is what you're feeling. Just start there. Don't start twisting, because that's a story. You don't need a story when you feel an emotion. Sometimes you feel an emotion without a story.
Well, and I think what you guys are teaching and what should be taught is that you should never use an emotion to fuel or to kick off a mental exercise, a story.
Well, you're getting a bit complex for a 3- and 4-year-old mind at that point.
I totally agree. I think that if you start where you guys are starting, you're not going to get there. But if we want to talk about the other half of Douglas's statement, how do you repair the broken adults, the folks who maybe have spent their lives, or a good portion of their lives, in an emotional, mental, ego sort of cycle? And part of it is breaking that cycle.
Well, it's realizing, and in your own studies, you saw this, once you're triggered, you have to go through that well-worn pattern that has been established when you were young or as an adult. There's a certain trigger, and you wind up going through all the ups and downs of the process. And it's only at the end that you realize that, wait a minute, I just did it again. I've gone through that whole thing all over again. And that's when you begin to come into that awareness point. Like, no, I don't want to keep doing that. You have to make the choice that this is not where you want to be. You want to be free. Because when you trigger an emotion like that, you are locked in, babe. There's nothing you can do to get out of that pattern, no matter how many people may be trying to guide you in another direction. Doesn't matter. You're going to go walk through that well-worn path like you are a choo-choo on rails.
Yes. And some of the therapies that are used, that Ekman and others, Dalai Lama have used, is to first of all educate people about what you just said. Is that when you're triggered, you're going to go through all the steps, So you can't stop the trigger, because the trigger is something which is subconscious.
Right.
And you can't stop the first part of the steps. So what the Dalai Lama says, and what Ekman also says, is that what you do is you train yourself to not act, to let the story play. Even though the story in your mind is just as vivid and vibrant, you stop yourself from acting upon it. You say to yourself, this is a story. And if it's the only thing you can do, and you realize that you're furious, you realize that you're terribly sad, whatever it is, the only beginning of the training is that you say to yourself, don't act. This is a story. And everything else will come, no matter what.
Yeah, don't act out.
Yeah.
What you wind up doing is, because your first reaction is to do something physical.
Yeah.
With young children, they'll either snatch it, or they'll throw something, or they'll hit. It's always with their hands.
Yeah.
So that's where you're in a moment of, okay, we have to refocus this physical reaction, and it's the old breathe. And breathing is an amazing thing, because it's something that you first learn when you're first born.
Yes.
And you become really aware of every breath you take. So when you're breathing, you feel the emotional response, and you just continue breathing, but let the emotions go. You're going through. Just go through, breathe, and feel it. And that's when you realize that you're more than what you're feeling in that moment. The problem is the difference between I feel and I am. You try to train your mind into I feel. Okay, I feel, I breathe. I breathe.
And there are many other things that can be used. You mentioned breathing. Everyone is familiar with somebody who's driving, and they're cut off, or something happens, and all of a sudden you go from being a relatively sane adult to a maniac, driving at very, very high speeds, doing dangerous things, yelling, cursing, screaming. These are all acting out. One of the techniques that Ekman talks about is just in literally doing that count to 10, or breathe 10 times, or let yourself become aware that you are triggered, that something happened, whatever it was. Somebody cut you off, something hit your car, whatever. Something was perceived as an attack, and emotion rises up, fear, followed almost immediately by anger. Those two oftentimes trigger each other. So an instantaneous fear triggers an anger, and then the anger overwhelms all things. You become, in essence, an unconscious, anger-driven entity playing out a story.
Right.
And you can see the damage it does. Perfectly sane people do terrible things when they're in a triggered fit of rage or anger.
Right.
And they'll often regret them, always regret them almost.
Yeah, you usually, it's saying things you don't mean and doing things you didn't want to.
Yes.
But to acknowledge that state can happen to you is one of the keys, because you can't begin to address an issue unless you admit that it is an issue.
Very much like all the 12-step programs.
You realize that, okay, I get triggered by this. This makes me crazy. Okay, let me breathe. This is what's making me crazy. Instead of blaming the other person that triggered you, see what they did. It's like, no. Realizing that you're telling yourself a story at that point because it's an experience you had before.
Right.
That's why experience is so important. Just as you said, the tender vine, when you're training a vine, and this is what they do with grapevine, they actually train them to grow up this trellis work so that they are in a tree form, and they're draping over this trellis so that when they have clusters of grapes, it's hanging fruit.
Yes.
So, training the tender vine to go a certain way that you know will be strong for them. These structures are the things that they can lean on until they're strong enough to stand on their own.
Yes.
And it's just a good lesson for all of us to realize that this is how we grow. This is what has shaped us all the way through. And to realize that, you know, I didn't want that. And I can actually change it.
That's a very, very subtle yet very powerful thing that oftentimes people overlook, is because the ego says, I am. They say, well, I can't change it. That's who I am. And how can I be not somebody I am? So the ego uses this existential argument. How can we change it? We won't be the same person. And you have to, again, kind of go out into beyond that. Say, well, when we're angry, or when I am angry, people get hurt. I get hurt. I hurt others. I have to find a way to get outside of that anger. It's like an addiction of some sort. You know, you have to find that you're at rock bottom. It's like my anger is becoming everything about me. No one wants to be around me because I'm always angry. I'm always bitter. I'm always criticizing. I'm always doing things that push everyone away from me. This is unfortunately the harder part, because you've grown an angry grapevine, in essence.
Sour grapevine.
Yes, you become a sour old grapevine. but because because it's grown into something that has roots and it has structure, it makes it very difficult to kind of fix.
Well, it's understanding that when it's a vine that's growing on the ground, the gardener has to figure a way to allow it to retrain itself so it can go up the lattice or up the tree in order to bring the fruit up off the ground. And that's what your life is. You're part of this process where you're bringing yourself up out of the ground. And you don't want your fruit, so, you know, it doesn't really come to fruition when the vine is hanging on the ground. It never does. It's trying to find the high point. And the structure, or what's the word I'm looking for? The tree, to bring the tree up to its fullness and strength, as well as for fruit, bearing a lot of fruit.
Bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
But you know, you said something that so interesting, struck me. You know, we are our own gardeners in essence. You know, we have the ability to garden ourselves, or to garden our lives. You know, again, it's an experiential journey. It is wonderful if you receive training at a younger age, because you will reap the benefits of that throughout your whole life. Early structures, things that are laid in when you're young, are so much easier. You learn a language, you learn how to deal with this or that, you learn some certain skills, and then you build upon them. If unfortunately you're at your life, wherever you are in your life, you haven't gotten those skills, or they're lacking, that does not mean that you just cannot change. It means that as your own gardener, it's a little more difficult. You've got some weeding to do. You've got some new planting to do. You've got some training yourself to do. But we are all still, until your last breath, able to change.
Yes. And
Are we going to change now?
Well, we may have to, but just acknowledging the fact that you yourself are capable of changing, and there is always space to grow. Always.
And I think we have a space that we have to grow out of right now, which is the end of the show.
Ah, yes. So I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.